The alarm bells screamed through the corridors of Kepler's Rest, but Ambassador Vethara knew they would not save her people. Her 4 delicate hands shook as she pressed them against the communication console, watching the enemy ships grow larger on the viewing screen. The Korthak had come with 50 warships, each one bigger than anything the peaceful Villani had ever built. "How long until they reach us?" she asked Chief Engineer Mordan, though she already feared the answer. 20 minutes, maybe less," he replied, his usually calm voice cracking with fear. "Their weapons are charging." "Ambassador, we need to evacuate." Vethara looked around the control room of their trading station. For 30 years, Kepler's Rest had been a place of peace and commerce. Ships from dozens of different species came here to trade goods, share knowledge, and build friendships. The Villani had built it as a symbol of everything they believed in. Now the Korthak were going to destroy it all. "Have you sent the distress call?" she asked. "Yes, but the nearest Council peacekeeping force is 3 weeks away. The Korthak will have us processed and shipped off to their slave worlds long before help arrives." Vethara closed her eyes. The Villani had evolved on a world with no predators, no wars, no violence. They had joined the galaxy believing that all species shared their love of peace. The Korthak had taught them how wrong they were. This raiding fleet had already destroyed 2 Villani colonies. Thousands of her people were now slaves in Korthak mines. "Send another message," she said quietly. "To the humans." Mordan looked shocked. "The humans? But Ambassador, they only joined the Council 6 months ago. They have barely any ships. What could they possibly do?" "I don't know," Vethara admitted. "But they are the only ones close enough to help. Their patrol fleet was reported near the Zeta sector yesterday. That's only 2 days from here." "A patrol fleet," Mordan said sadly. "Probably 3 or 4 small ships. The Korthak will brush them aside like insects." Vethara began typing the emergency message anyway. She had met the human ambassador once, a woman named Sarah Martinez, who had seemed kind but oddly intense. There had been something in her eyes that reminded Vethara of the old predator species, the ones that most civilized worlds had moved away from. But humans claimed to be peaceful traders and explorers, just like the Villani. The message was simple: Kepler's Rest under attack by Korthak raiding fleet. 50 enemy warships. Request immediate assistance. Will be overrun within hours. Please help. She sent it on all emergency frequencies and then sat back in her chair. On the screen, the Korthak ships were close enough now that she could see their weapon ports opening. The leader of this fleet was Commander Thakmor, a brutal warrior who had personally overseen the enslavement of 6 different species. "All civilians to the escape pods," she announced over the station's communication system. "This is not a drill. Repeat, all civilians to escape pods immediately." But even as she said it, Vethara knew it was hopeless. The Korthak were too fast, too well armed. Their ships would catch the escape pods before they could reach safety. The Villani would become slaves, and Kepler's Rest would become another Korthak trophy. The first energy blasts hit the station's outer shields. The lights flickered, and Vethara felt the deck shake beneath her feet. The Korthak were not interested in capturing the station intact. They wanted to break the Villani resistance quickly and completely. "Shield generators down to 60%, Mordan reported. "They're targeting our weapon systems first." What weapon systems? Vethara thought bitterly. The station had a few defensive turrets designed to stop pirates and asteroids. Against a Korthak war fleet, they were useless. More blasts hit the station. The lights went out completely and emergency power kicked in, bathing everything in a red glow. Vethara could hear the sound of metal tearing and atmosphere venting into space. The Korthak were being thorough. "Ambassador," Mordan said urgently, "I'm getting a response to our distress call." "From the Council?" "No, from the humans." Vethara's heart skipped. "What do they say?" Mordan read from his screen. Message received. "Help is coming. Hold position. Do not surrender. Signed, Admiral Sarah Chen, Human Fleet Command." "Admiral?" Vethara was confused. "I thought they only had a patrol group in this sector." "That's what the intelligence report said," Mordan agreed. "Maybe they promoted someone for this mission?" Another massive blast rocked the station. This time the deck plates buckled and sparks flew from several control panels. The Korthak were getting closer, and their weapons were getting more accurate. "Attention, Villani." A harsh voice came over the communication system. It was Commander Thakmor himself. "This is your only warning. Surrender now and we will be merciful. Your deaths will be quick. Resist and we will make you suffer before you become our slaves." Vethara looked at Mordan. The engineer was a gentle soul who had never hurt anyone in his life. But now his face was set with determination. "Send a reply," he said. "Tell him we're still here." "Shield generators down to 20%, another technician called out. "Hull breaches on levels 7 through 12. We're losing atmosphere fast." The escape pods were launching now, small silver dots fleeing into space. But just as Vethara had feared, the Korthak fighters were already moving to intercept them. She watched in horror as green energy beams reached out to disable the fleeing ships. Her people would not even have the mercy of death. How long until the humans arrive? She asked. Morden checked his calculations. If they left immediately after receiving our message, and if they're really only 2 days away, 36 hours at the earliest. "We'll be dead in 2 hours, another technician said quietly. Vethara nodded, but something inside her refused to give up. The human message had been so confident, so certain. "Help is coming. Do not surrender." As if Admiral Chen knew something that Vethara did not. The station shook again, more violently this time. The main power grid was failing, and life support was running on backup systems. The Korthak would board them soon, and then the real horror would begin. Vethara had heard the stories from other survivors. The Korthak liked to make examples of those who resisted. "Incoming transmission," Mordan said suddenly. It's from the human fleet. Put it through." A new voice came over the speakers, calm and professional. "Kepler's Rest. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the human fleet. We have received your distress call and are en route to your position. Estimated arrival in 18 hours. Hold your position and do not surrender. We are bringing adequate forces to resolve this situation." 18 hours. Better than 36, but still too long. And what did adequate forces mean? 3 ships? 5? However many they had, it would not be enough against 50 Korthak warships. But as the station continued to shake under enemy fire, and as her people continued to flee in their tiny escape pods, Vethara found herself holding on to that calm, confident voice. The humans were coming. Somehow that made the terror a little easier to bear. She just hoped some of them would still be alive when the humans arrived. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Indomitable, staring at the message that had just arrived. Around her, the usual sounds of a warship at work continued. Officers gave quiet orders, computers hummed, and somewhere in the distance, she could hear the rhythmic steps of Marines doing their morning exercises. "Ma'am?" Commander Jackson, her second-in-command, was waiting for her response. "The Villani distress call?" Sarah read the message again. 50 Korthak ships attacking a peaceful trading station. She had read the intelligence reports about the Korthak. They were slavers, raiders, and bullies who picked on species that could not fight back. The kind of enemy that made her job both necessary and satisfying. "Signal the fleet," she said calmly. "All ships to combat readiness. We're going to war." Jackson blinked. "Ma'am, should we not contact the Galactic Council first? Perhaps negotiate?" Sarah looked at him with the expression that had earned her the nickname Ice Queen among the younger officers. "Commander, 50 armed warships are attacking civilians. What exactly would you like to negotiate?" "Of course, Admiral. I'll signal the fleet immediately." As Jackson moved to carry out her orders, Sarah allowed herself a small smile. The galaxy had been very polite to humanity since they joined the Galactic Council. Very careful, very diplomatic. Most species seemed to think humans were just another peaceful race of traders and explorers. They had no idea what humans actually were. The training exercise had been her idea. 200 ships and 50,000 personnel, conducting routine maneuvers in the Outer Rim territories. The Council had been told it was a way for humanity to practice space operations in their new fleet. What they had not been told was that this was a fully armed battle fleet, equipped with the most advanced weapons humanity had ever built. "Fleet signals ready." "Admiral," Jackson reported. "Put me through to all ships." The main screen lit up with dozens of smaller screens, each showing the bridge of a different human ship. Captains, commodores, and ship commanders looked back at her. Some were young, some were old, but all of them had the same look in their eyes. They were warriors, and they had been waiting for this moment. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sarah began, "we have received a distress call from Kepler's Rest. A peaceful trading station operated by the Villani is under attack by a Korthak raiding fleet. 50 enemy ships, unknown number of civilians at risk." She could see the change in their faces. The boredom of training exercises was gone, replaced by cold professional focus. "The Korthak are slavers," she continued. They capture entire populations and sell them to the highest bidder. They have already destroyed 2 Volani colonies. Today, they made the mistake of attacking civilians while humanity was nearby. Captain Rodriguez of the carrier Valkyrie spoke up. Rules of engagement, Admiral? The Korthak have been given the opportunity to withdraw. When we arrive, we will give them one chance to surrender. If they refuse, we will destroy them. Sarah's voice was ice cold. We are not peacekeepers. We are not negotiators. We are the hammer, and the Korthak have made themselves the nail. Time to target? Asked Commodore Kim from the battleship Titan. 18 hours at maximum burn. I want the fleet in full battle formation when we drop out of hyperspace. Carriers launch fighters immediately upon arrival. Destroyers form hunter-killer groups. Battleships target their largest vessels. We go in hard and we go in fast. The screen filled with acknowledgments from her captains. Sarah could see the excitement building in their eyes. Humanity had not fought a real war in over 50 years. Their military had been preparing, training, and improving, but always in simulations and exercises. Now they would find out if all that preparation had been worth it. Admiral, Commander Jackson said quietly, the intelligence reports suggest that Korthak ships are quite advanced. Their weapons technology is supposed to be among the best in the galaxy. Sarah nodded. According to the reports, yes. What the reports don't mention is that Korthak ships are designed for raiding and intimidation. They're built to fight civilians and lightly armed peacekeepers. They've never faced a fleet designed from the ground up for war. She turned to look out at the stars through the main view screen. Somewhere out there, the Volani were fighting for their lives against an enemy that saw them as nothing more than merchandise. The galaxy had grown comfortable with this. Species like the Korthak were tolerated because stopping them would require violence, and most galactic civilizations had moved beyond violence. Humanity had not. Fleet reports ready for hyperspace jump, the navigation officer announced. Take us to war, Sarah ordered. The stars stretched into lines as the human fleet entered hyperspace. 200 ships moving in perfect formation, like a school of predatory fish heading toward feeding grounds. In the fighter bays, pilots were already suiting up and running final checks on their weapons. In the marine barracks, soldiers were loading ammunition and sharpening knives. In the engine rooms, technicians were pushing the reactors to maximum output. The Korthak thought they were facing a helpless trading station protected by a few light patrol ships. Instead, they were about to encounter the most advanced military force humanity had ever assembled. Sarah walked to her command chair and sat down, watching the hyperspace readings on her screens. 18 hours to reach Kepler's rest. 18 hours to prepare for humanity's first real battle since joining the galactic community. She thought about the message she had sent to the Volani. Help is coming. Do not surrender. We are bringing adequate forces. The Volani probably thought adequate forces meant a small squadron of human ships, maybe 5 or 6 vessels at most. They could not imagine that any species would respond to a distress call with a full battle fleet. But then most species had never been in a position where genocide was just another word for Tuesday. Most species had never spent thousands of years perfecting the art of killing each other. Most species had never looked at the universe and decided that the strong had a duty to protect the weak, no matter the cost. Admiral, the communications officer called out, we're receiving updates from long-range sensors. The situation at Kepler's Rest is deteriorating. The station is heavily damaged and multiple escape pods have been captured. Sarah's jaw tightened. Captured escape pods meant prisoners. Prisoners meant slaves. The Korthak were already beginning the process that had destroyed so many other civilizations. Can we go any faster? She asked the navigation officer. We're already at maximum burn, ma'am. Any faster and we risk damaging the engines. Damage them, Sarah said simply. We can fix engines. We can't bring back the dead, yes ma'am. Increasing speed to 110%. Around the bridge, warning lights began to flash as the ship's engines strained beyond their normal limits. Sarah could feel the deck vibrating beneath her feet as the Indomitable pushed itself harder than it had ever gone before. Somewhere ahead of them, the Korthak were probably celebrating their easy victory. Another peaceful species broken, another population ready for the slave markets. They had no idea that their actions had just declared war on the one species in the galaxy that still remembered how to fight. Sarah smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. The Korthak wanted to play the old game of predator and prey. They were about to learn that humanity had never stopped being predators. They had just been waiting for the right prey to come along. Commander Thakmor stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Blood Reaper, and admired his work. Kepler's Rest was now a broken shell, its outer sections torn open and venting atmosphere into space. The Vellani had fought with surprising courage for such a weak species, but courage meant nothing against superior firepower. "Status report," he growled to his second-in-command. "The station is secure, Commander. We have captured 3,000 Vellani from the escape pods. Another 1,000 died during the assault. The survivors will fetch good prices at the Nexus slave markets." Thakmor nodded with satisfaction. 3,000 slaves would make this raid quite profitable. The Korthak Empire needed workers for its mining colonies, and the Vellani were known to be intelligent and hard-working. They would adapt to slavery better than some species. What about their distress calls? They sent messages to the Galactic Council and to the humans. The Council's nearest peacekeeping force is weeks away. As for the humans, his aide shrugged. They are new to space. Probably have a few patrol ships at most. Humans, Thakmor repeated, tasting the word. He had read the intelligence reports about humanity's recent admission to the Galactic Council. Another species of peaceful traders and diplomats, much like the Vellani. The galaxy seemed full of such weaklings these days. "Commander," his sensor operator called out. "I'm detecting hyperspace signatures. Multiple contacts. Well, how many?" 3. "No, 5. Wait." The operator's voice became confused. "Commander, I'm reading over 50 contacts." "Maybe more." Thakmor frowned. That was far more ships than any Council peacekeeping force. "Are you certain?" "The signatures are getting stronger. Whatever's coming, it's big." On screen. The main view screen showed empty space around Kepler's Rest. The wreckage of the station drifted slowly in the void, surrounded by the dark shapes of Korthak warships. Everything looked normal. Then space began to tear. The first ship that emerged from hyperspace was massive, easily twice the size of Thakmor's flagship. Its hull was dark gray, almost black, and covered with weapon ports. Before Thakmor could process what he was seeing, more ships appeared. Dozens of them. Then hundreds. "Get me a count," he snapped. The sensor operator's voice was shaking. 200 ships, Commander. Maybe more. They're still coming. 200 ships. That was not a patrol force. That was not a peacekeeping mission. That was a battle fleet. The human ships moved with a precision that made Thakmor's stomach clench. They formed perfect battle lines, their weapons already charging, their fighters launching in coordinated waves. This was not the confused response of a peaceful species caught off guard. This was the smooth, practiced movement of warriors who knew exactly what they were doing. "Communications," Thakmor barked. "Get me whoever's in charge of that fleet." A moment later, a new voice came over the bridge speakers. It was calm, professional, and utterly cold. "Korthak vessels, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the human fleet. You have attacked a peaceful civilian station and taken prisoners. You have 60 seconds to cease all hostile actions and withdraw from this system, or we will consider you enemy combatants." Thakmor stared at the view screen. The human fleet had spread out into a formation that surrounded his ships completely. There was no escape route, no tactical advantage he could exploit. They had appeared from hyperspace in perfect position to destroy his entire force. But the Korthak Empire had conquered dozens of worlds. His ships had weapons that could crack planets. Surely these newcomers, however many ships they had, could not match Korthak military might. "Human Admiral," he replied, putting as much authority into his voice as possible. "I am Commander Thakmor of the Korthak Empire. You are interfering with a legitimate military operation. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." There was a pause. Then the human voice returned, and it was even colder than before. "You chose violence. We perfected it." The human fleet opened fire. Thakmor had been in dozens of battles. He had seen energy weapons tear through ship hulls, watched torpedo explosions tear vessels apart, witnessed the chaos and confusion of space combat. But he had never seen anything like this. The human attack was not chaotic. It was not desperate. It was surgical. Coordinated volleys of energy beams reached out from the human ships, each one precisely targeted. Thakmor watched in shock as 3 of his destroyers simply ceased to exist, torn apart by weapons that seemed to cut through their shields like they were not even there. "Return fire," he screamed. His ships tried to respond, but the humans had already moved. Their formation shifted like a living thing. Smaller ships darting between his vessels while the larger ones maintained a deadly crossfire. Korthak energy beams lashed out but hit only empty space where human ships had been moments before. More Korthak ships died. The cruiser Bone Crusher exploded in a ball of fire that lit up the bridge of the Blood Reaper. The destroyer pack hunters tried to flank the human formation, only to run straight into a wall of torpedo fire that reduced them to scrap metal. How are they doing this? Thakamor demanded. His tactical officer was frantically working at his console. Their ships are faster than ours, Commander. More maneuverable. And their weapons, he paused, staring at his readings. Their weapons are incredibly advanced. Our shields are stopping maybe 30% of their firepower. On the screen, Thakamor could see human fighters swarming around his remaining ships. They moved like insects impossible to target, striking with precision before disappearing back into the chaos of battle. Each attack took out weapon systems, engines, or life support. The human pilots were not just trying to win. They were trying to capture his ships intact. Commander, the communications officer's voice was full of panic. The Voidstalker is requesting permission to surrender. Denied, Thakamor snarled. We are Korthak. We do not surrender to anyone. But even as he said it, he could see that the battle was already over. Half his fleet was gone, destroyed, or disabled. The remaining ships were scattered, their formations broken, their crews demoralized. The humans had done in 20 minutes what should have taken hours. The worst part was that the human fleet barely seemed damaged. A few ships showed scorch marks from Korthak weapons, but none had been destroyed. It was as if the Korthak had been fighting children and now the adults had arrived. Korthak Commander, the human admiral's voice came over the speakers again. Your fleet is defeated. Surrender now and your crews will be treated according to galactic law. Continue fighting and we will finish what you started. Thakamor looked around his bridge. Half his officers were dead or wounded. His ship's weapons were offline and his engines were failing. Through the view screen, he could see human marines preparing to board his remaining vessels. For the first time in his career, Commander Thakamor of the Korthak Empire did something he had never imagined possible. All ships, he said quietly, stand down. Signal surrender to the human fleet. As his remaining vessels powered down their weapons, Thakamor realized that everything he thought he knew about the galaxy had just changed. These humans were not traitors or diplomats. They were not another peaceful species to be bullied and enslaved. They were apex predators, and the Korthak had just learned what it felt like to be prey. The human ships moved in to secure their prisoners. Their movements still precise and coordinated. There was no celebration, no gloating. They went about their work with the calm efficiency of professionals who had done this many times before. Thakamor slumped in his command chair and waited for the humans to board his ship. The Vellani had called for backup, and the humans had responded with overwhelming force. The galaxy would never be the same. Lieutenant Marcus Webb guided his fighter through the wreckage of a Korthak destroyer, his targeting system already locking onto the next enemy ship. Around him, hundreds of other human fighters moved in perfect coordination, their attacks precisely timed to maximize damage while minimizing risk. Red Squadron, form up on me, came the voice of his squadron leader over the comm. We're going after that cruiser. Marcus pulled his fighter into formation with 11 other ships, their engines synchronized as they accelerated toward the Korthak vessel. The cruiser was trying to escape, its engines glowing as it desperately sought to reach the edge of the battle zone. Target their engine pods, the squadron leader ordered. We want this one intact for interrogation. Marcus smiled inside his helmet. The Korthak had built their ships for intimidation, all sharp angles and aggressive styling. But they were slow and clumsy compared to human fighters. His craft could turn inside their weapon arcs and strike before they could even track him. He lined up his shot and fired a burst of precise energy bolts. The Korthak cruiser's port engine exploded in a shower of sparks, sending the massive ship into an uncontrolled spin. The other fighters in his squadron followed up, systematically destroying the remaining engines until the cruiser was dead in space. Good work, Red Squadron, came Admiral Chen's voice over the command frequency. Move to assist Blue Squadron with the remaining destroyers. Marcus pulled his fighter around and headed toward the next target. Behind him, he could see the massive bulk of the human fleet engaging the Korthak in a battle that was already decided. The enemy had started with 50 ships. Now they had maybe 15 still fighting, and those were scattered and demoralized. The human fleet moved like a single organism. The carriers launched endless waves of fighters while staying safely behind the battle line. The destroyers worked in packs, surrounding and destroying larger Korthak vessels with coordinated attacks. The battleships provided heavy fire support, their massive guns reaching out to cripple enemy ships from long range. It was beautiful, in a deadly sort of way. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Chen watched the battle unfold with professional satisfaction. Her fleet was performing exactly as trained, each ship fulfilling its role in the larger plan. The Korthak were brave fighters, she had to give them that. But bravery meant nothing against superior tactics and technology. "Admiral," Commander Jackson reported, "the Korthak flagship is requesting surrender terms." "About time," Chen replied. "Signal all ships to cease fire on vessels that have surrendered, but keep weapons locked on anyone still fighting." She watched as more Korthak ships powered down their weapons and shields. The smart ones were giving up. The stubborn ones were being systematically destroyed by her fleet. "Marine shuttles are requesting permission to begin boarding operations," Jackson added. "Granted, but I want full combat teams. The Korthak may try to fight even after surrendering." Colonel Maria Santos led the first wave of Marines boarding the Korthak flagship. Her team moved through the airlocks with weapons ready, expecting fierce resistance. Instead, they found corridors full of wounded and demoralized Korthak warriors. The aliens were larger than humans, with thick gray skin and natural armor plating, but they looked at the human Marines with something that might have been fear. Word of the battle had spread through their ship. An entire Korthak raiding fleet had been destroyed in less than 2 hours by enemies they had never heard of. "Secure the bridge," Santos ordered her team. "I want their commander alive for questioning." They found Commander Thakamore slumped in his command chair, staring at the tactical displays that showed the destruction of his fleet. When he saw the human Marines enter his bridge, he straightened up and tried to look dignified. "I am Commander Thakamore of the Korthak Empire," he said in heavily accented galactic standard. "I demand to be treated according to the rules of war." Santos looked at him through her helmet visor. "You attacked civilians. You took prisoners for slavery. You don't get to demand anything." She turned to her sergeant. "Secure the computer systems. I want everything downloaded. Ship logs, tactical databases, communication records, everything." As her Marines went to work, Santos studied the Korthak commander. He was trying to project authority, but she could see the fear in his eyes. His species had been raiding and enslaving others for generations, but they had never faced real opposition. "How many Villani did you capture?" she asked. 3,000, Thakamore replied reluctantly. "They are unharmed. We do not damage valuable merchandise." Santos felt anger surge through her, but she kept her voice level. "You're going to help us find them. All of them. And you're going to help us get them home safely." "And if I refuse?" Santos smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Then we'll ask your crew. I'm sure someone will be more cooperative than you." On another Korthak ship, Sergeant David Kim was discovering just how thorough the human attack had been. The enemy vessel had been disabled, not destroyed. Its weapons were offline, its engines dead, but its life support was still functioning. The Korthak crew was alive but helpless. How did they do this? One of the Korthak officers asked in broken galactic standard. "Your ships, they are so fast, so precise. It is impossible." Kim checked his weapon and continued searching the ship for holdouts. "Not impossible. Just practiced." "Practiced? But the intelligence report said humans are peaceful. Traders and explorers," Kim laughed. "We are peaceful. This is us being peaceful. You should see us when we're angry." The Korthak officer looked confused, so Kim decided to explain. "You attacked civilians, innocent people who never hurt anyone. That made us angry. This," he gestured around the disabled ship, "this is us being restrained." Meanwhile, in the medical bay of the human carrier Valkyrie, Dr. Jennifer Hayes was treating the first group of rescued Villani. The aliens were in bad condition, showing signs of stress and malnutrition from their brief captivity. But they were alive and they were free. "How many humans came?" asked one of the Villani refugees, a young female with large frightened eyes. 200 ships, Dr. Hayes replied as she treated a burn on the alien's arm. "About 50,000 people total." The Villani's eyes grew even larger. 50,000 for us?" "For anyone who needs help," Dr. Hayes said simply. "That's what we do." She had seen the intelligence reports about the Korthak Empire. They controlled dozens of star systems through fear and slavery. They had been operating for centuries without serious opposition, because most galactic civilizations preferred negotiation to war. Humanity preferred results. "Doctor," her assistant called out, "we're getting more refugees from the other ships. Looks like the Marines found the main holding area." Dr. Hayes nodded and prepared for the next wave of patients. Around her, the medical team worked with efficient compassion, treating injuries and trauma with equal skill. These Villani would go home to their families. The Korthak would face justice, and the galaxy would learn that some species still believed in protecting the innocent. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Chen was receiving final reports from her fleet commanders. Korthak fleet completely neutralized, Captain Rodriguez reported from the carrier Valkyrie. 37 ships destroyed, 13 captured intact. All Villani prisoners recovered alive. Casualties? Chen asked. Minor damage to 6 of our ships, 17 wounded, no fatalities, Chen nodded. The battle had gone better than even her most optimistic projections. The Korthak had been completely outmatched, not just in numbers but in technology and tactics. "Begin salvage operations," she ordered. "I want those Korthak ships studied. Their technology, their databases, their communication codes. Everything." She turned to look at the tactical display, where the wreckage of the Korthak fleet drifted among the stars. The battle was over, but the war was just beginning. The Korthak Empire was vast, with hundreds of ships and thousands of slaves. Today's victory was just the first step, but it was an important step. The galaxy would see what had happened here. They would see that the Korthak could be beaten, that slavers and raiders were not invincible. And they would see that humanity was not just another peaceful species of traders. They were the galaxy's new apex predators, and they had just announced their presence with overwhelming force. Ambassador Kethvar of the Galactic Council stood in the emergency session chamber, watching the recording for the 3rd time. On the massive central screen, the battle at Kepler's Rest played out in silent majesty. 200 human ships appearing from hyperspace, forming perfect battle lines, and then systematically destroying a Korthak raiding fleet that had terrorized the galaxy for decades. "How many ships did you say the humans sent?" asked Ambassador Veltar from the Hegemony worlds. 212, according to our sensors," Kethvar replied, still staring at the screen. "Plus fighter craft, support vessels, and approximately 50,000 military personnel." The chamber erupted in shocked whispers. Every species represented in the council had read the same intelligence reports about humanity. A peaceful race of traders and explorers who had recently achieved faster-than-light travel. Their admission to the council 6 months ago had been routine, almost boring. "This changes everything," said Ambassador Zorthak from the Crystal Republics. "If the humans can deploy this kind of force for a simple rescue mission, what else are they capable of?" Kethvar did not answer immediately. He was thinking about the human ambassador, Sarah Martinez, who always sat quietly during council meetings and never raised objections to any proposals. She had seemed so reasonable, so diplomatic. Had she known? Had she been sitting there planning for war while everyone else talked about trade agreements? "We need to contact the human government immediately," announced Ambassador Feldor from the merchant guilds. This action was taken without council approval. There must be consequences. Consequences? Kethvar looked at his colleague with disbelief. They saved 3,000 Villani civilians from slavery. They defeated the most dangerous raiding fleet in this sector. What consequences would you suggest? They deployed a battle fleet without informing the council, Feldor insisted. That violates several treaties about military operations in neutral space. The argument was interrupted by the chamber doors opening. Ambassador Martinez walked in, flanked by 2 human aides. She looked exactly the same as always. Calm, professional, and completely unintimidating. But now Kethvar found himself studying her more carefully, looking for signs of the warrior species that had just revealed itself to the galaxy. "Honored ambassadors," Martinez said, taking her place at the human delegations table. "I understand you have questions about recent events at Kepler's Rest." "Questions?" Ambassador Feldor was practically sputtering. "Your people deployed a war fleet without permission. This is a violation of what exactly?" Martinez interrupted, her voice still perfectly polite. "The Council Charter clearly states that member species have the right to defend themselves and protect civilians from illegal aggression. The Korthak attack on Kepler's Rest was both unprovoked and in violation of 17 different galactic laws." She activated a holographic display above her table, showing detailed legal citations. "The Villani requested assistance. We provided it. End of story. Kithvar leaned forward. Ambassador Martinez, our intelligence report suggested that humanity possessed a small exploration fleet. Perhaps a dozen ships at most. Where did this battle fleet come from? Martinez smiled, and for the first time, Kithvar thought he could see something predatory in her expression. Our intelligence reports were apparently incomplete. Humanity maintains a substantial military force for defensive purposes. Defensive? Ambassador Zorthak's crystal carapace was glowing with agitation. 200 ships is not defensive. That is an invasion force, is it? Martinez asked mildly. The Korthak brought 50 ships to attack civilians. We brought enough ships to stop them. Would you have preferred that we let the Villani be enslaved? The chamber fell silent. None of them could argue with the result. The Villani were free. The Korthak raiding fleet was destroyed, and civilian casualties had been minimal. By any objective measure, the human response had been both effective and proportional, but it had also been terrifying. Meanwhile, in the Korthak home system of Vorkesh, Supreme Commander Grakthor was reading the reports from Kepler's Rest with growing horror. An entire raiding fleet destroyed in 2 hours, 50 ships that had conquered dozens of worlds, reduced to scrap metal by an enemy they had never encountered before. How is this possible? He demanded of his intelligence chief. The humans are supposed to be weak, peaceful traders with no military experience. The intelligence was wrong, Supreme Commander, the chief replied nervously. It appears that humanity has been concealing their true capabilities. Grakthor studied the tactical analysis of the battle. The human ships had moved with precision that spoke of extensive training and experience. Their weapons technology was clearly superior to anything the Korthak possessed. Most disturbing of all, they had won the battle without losing a single ship. What do we know about their fleet strength? He asked. Unknown, Supreme Commander. If they can deploy 200 ships for a rescue mission, their total fleet could be much larger, possibly thousands of vessels, thousands of ships. Grakthor felt something he had not experienced in decades: fear. The Korthak Empire was built on the principle that superior force could overcome any opposition. But what happened when you encountered a force that was superior to yours? Cancel all raiding operations in human space, he ordered. Recall our fleets to defensive positions, and send a diplomatic message to the human government. Tell them we wish to discuss terms. The intelligence chief looked shocked. Terms, Supreme Commander? We do not negotiate with our enemies. We do when they can destroy our entire fleet in 2 hours, Grakthor replied grimly. Back on the human homeworld of Earth, President Elena Vasquez was meeting with her military advisors in the secure briefing room beneath the Capitol building. The walls were covered with tactical displays showing ship positions throughout human space. The council session went about as expected, she told Admiral Chen, who had returned from Kepler's Rest the day before. Lots of shock, some anger, and a great deal of fear. Any formal protests? Chen asked. Several, but nothing they can actually act on. We followed galactic law to the letter. Vasquez smiled. Your suggestion to record everything paid off. The legal department is very happy with the documentation. She turned to look at the star charts on the wall. Red markers showed known Korthak positions, while blue markers indicated human fleet deployments. What's our next move? The Korthak are already pulling back their raiding fleets, Chen reported. Our intelligence suggests they're concentrating forces around their core worlds. Classic defensive posture. They're scared, added General Morrison from the Army. They thought they were the apex predators in this part of the galaxy. Now they know better. Vasquez nodded. And the other species? Mixed reactions, Chen replied. Some are grateful that someone finally stood up to the Korthak. Others are worried about human intentions. A few are sending diplomatic feelers about possible alliance. Agreements. Good, that's exactly what we wanted. Vasquez had been planning for this moment since humanity first learned about the galactic community, a galaxy full of peaceful species, terrorized by bullies and raiders with no one willing or able to fight back. It had been an opportunity too good to pass up. Ma'am. An aide entered the room with an urgent message. The Villani government has sent a formal alliance proposal. They're offering exclusive trading rights and military basing agreements in exchange for protection. First domino, Chen said with satisfaction. Vasquez read the proposal quickly. Approved. Send them a positive response and begin negotiations immediately. She looked around the room at her advisors. Gentlemen, ladies, this is just the beginning. The galaxy spent centuries building a system based on diplomacy and negotiation, very civilized, very peaceful, and completely unable to deal with species that prefer violence. She stood up and walked to the star chart. We're going to change that system, not through conquest or intimidation, but by showing everyone that bullies can be stopped, that civilians can be protected, that there's an alternative to living in fear. And if other species object to our methods, asked General Morrison. Vasquez smiled. Then they can try to stop us. But I suspect most of them will be too busy asking for our help. On the bridge of the Indomitable, now patrolling the border between human and Korthak space, Admiral Chen was reading the latest intelligence reports. The Battle of Kepler's Rest, as it was already being called, had sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. Trade routes were shifting as merchants sought the protection of human space. Diplomatic missions were arriving daily with requests for assistance. And in the darker corners of the galaxy, raiders and slavers were having second thoughts about their career choices. Admiral, Commander Jackson reported, we're receiving a priority message from Earth. New orders. Chen read the message and smiled. Another distress call, this time from a mining colony under attack by pirates. The locals had specifically requested human assistance. Signal the fleet, she ordered. We have work to do. As the human ships changed course toward their next mission, Chen reflected on how much the galaxy had changed in just a few days. The Villani had called for backup, expecting maybe a few patrol ships. Instead, they had gotten a demonstration of what humanity could accomplish. The galaxy was dying, and Ambassador Keth 7 knew it. The crystal being stood before the great viewing screen on the emergency command station, watching another star system disappear into darkness. Where the Kepler colonies had thrived just days ago, now only empty space remained. No debris, no radiation signatures, nothing at all, as if billions of lives had simply been erased from existence. The Void Swarm had done this. They always left nothing behind. Sir, we're receiving the final transmission from the Luminal Home Systems, reported Commander Vex, his voice crackling through the translation device. The energy-based luminals had been one of the most advanced species in the galaxy. Their technology could manipulate matter at the quantum level. They had seemed unstoppable. The transmission played across the command center. Ambassador Keth 7 watched in horror as beings of pure light fought desperately against dark, writhing masses that seemed to absorb everything they touched. The luminal warriors fired their most powerful energy weapons, but the creatures simply grew larger, adapting to each attack within minutes. They're learning from us, came the panicked voice of a luminal commander. Every weapon we use, every tactic we try, they counter it faster than we can think. They're not just killing us, they're becoming us, and then they're becoming something worse. The transmission cut to static. Keth 7 felt his crystalline body dim with despair. The luminals had fallen in less than a week. Before them, the mighty Nixari Empire had lasted only days against the swarm. The technology-dependent Zephyrians had been consumed in hours. Every major civilization in the galaxy had the same story. The Void Swarm would appear at the edge of a system, a writhing mass of biomechanical nightmares that seemed to be part machine, part living creature, and part something else entirely. They would study their prey, learning and adapting to every defense, every weapon, every strategy. Then they would strike and nothing would remain. How many systems have we lost? Keth 7 asked, though he dreaded the answer. 43% of all inhabited worlds, Vex replied quietly. The outer rim is completely gone. The middle territories are falling faster than we can evacuate them. At this rate, the core worlds have maybe 2 months before the swarm reaches them. Keth 7 turned away from the viewing screen. The emergency command station housed refugees from dozens of species, all the greatest minds and leaders who had managed to escape the swarm's advance. They had tried everything. Quantum weapons, dimensional shields, time distortion fields, biological warfare, even attempts at communication. Nothing worked. Have we heard anything from the Zenithari research teams? He asked, grasping for hope. Commander Vex's tentacles drooped. The research station at Zenithar Prime went dark 6 hours ago. They were working on a new type of energy weapon that could theoretically adapt faster than the swarm. We think they may have had a breakthrough, but he didn't need to finish. The swarm had found them first. Keth 7 walked to his private chambers, feeling older than his 700 years. As ambassador for the Galactic Confederation, he was supposed to find solutions to build bridges between species, to maintain peace and cooperation. But how could he build bridges when there would soon be no one left to connect? He sat at his desk and activated his personal data archive. Somewhere in the vast collection of galactic records, there had to be something they had missed. Some species they hadn't contacted, some technology they hadn't tried, some strategy that might work. Hours passed as he searched through files. He reviewed every known civilization, every first contact report, every technological innovation. The results were always the same. Every species that could help was either already fighting and losing, or had been consumed entirely. Then he found something strange. Deep in the restricted files, marked with warnings and quarantine notices, was a system designation, Sol. The file was flagged with a classification he had never seen before. Extreme hazard, Death World survivors. Curious, despite his despair, Keth-7 opened the file. The first entry made him pause. Warning: this species has been classified as unsuitable for standard diplomatic contact. Approach with extreme caution. Recommend indefinite quarantine protocols. He read further. The species called themselves humans, and they came from a world that the survey teams had labeled as actively hostile to life. The planet's surface was covered in poisonous gas that other species couldn't breathe. It had extreme temperature variations, massive storms, deadly radiation from its star, natural disasters that could level entire continents. But somehow, impossibly, intelligent life had not just survived there, but thrived. The survey reports were filled with disturbing observations. The humans were described as aggressive, unpredictable, and capable of surviving in conditions that would kill most galactic species within minutes. They seemed to actually enjoy dangerous situations. Their entertainment involved simulated combat, extreme physical challenges, and stories about overcoming impossible odds. Most disturbing of all, they had developed technology by fighting each other. While other species had advanced through cooperation and peaceful research, humans had created their greatest innovations during periods of warfare. They had somehow turned their violent nature into a tool for progress. The file contained a note from the original survey team leader. These beings are clearly intelligent and may possess advanced technology, but they are too dangerous for contact with civilized species. Their mindset is fundamentally incompatible with galactic peace. Recommend permanent isolation. Keth-7 read the report again, then a third time. A terrible, desperate idea began to form in his mind. What if their greatest weakness was actually their greatest strength? What if the very things that made humans unsuitable for galactic civilization were exactly what was needed to fight the swarm? The Void Swarm adapted to logical, predictable responses. It learned from rational tactics and technological solutions. Every species had approached the problem the same way, with their best technology, their most advanced weapons, their most brilliant strategies, and every species had failed. But what if someone approached the problem differently? What if someone fought not with logic and advanced technology, but with the kind of chaotic, unpredictable methods that had evolved on a world where survival itself was a daily battle? Keth-7 stood up quickly, his crystal form brightening with the first hope he had felt in weeks. It was insane. It was desperate. It went against every principle of galactic civilization. It might be their only chance. He rushed back to the command center and activated the long-range communication array. The Sol system was far beyond the current quarantine zone, in a region that the swarm hadn't reached yet. If the humans were still alive, if they were willing to help, if they could somehow succeed where advanced civilizations had failed, Commander Vex, prepare a priority transmission to the Sol system, he ordered. Sir, but that system is under quarantine protocols. Contact is strictly forbidden. The quarantine protocols assumed we would have a galaxy left to protect, Keth-7 replied grimly. Send the message on all frequencies. Full disclosure of our situation, tell them what we're facing, and ask if they're willing to help. As the message transmitted across space toward Earth, Keth-7 whispered a prayer to whatever powers might still be listening. They had asked the most advanced species in the galaxy for help, and it hadn't been enough. Now they were asking the most dangerous species they knew of. The response came back faster than expected. The message was short, direct, and unlike any diplomatic communication Keth-7 had ever received. Received your transmission. Situation understood. United Earth Defense Corps is mobilizing. ETA to your position, 6 days. Hold the line until we get there. We're coming. For the first time in months, Ambassador Keth-7 allowed himself to hope. The human fleet arrived at Crystalis exactly when they said they would, and nothing about them matched what the survivors expected. Ambassador Keth-7 stood in the observation deck of the refugee command station, watching the approaching ships with growing confusion. The vessel designs were crude by galactic standards. Instead of the elegant curves and energy matrices that characterized advanced technology, the human ships looked like metal boxes covered in weapons and armor plating. "Are those chemical rockets?" asked Commander Vex, his voice filled with disbelief. "I believe so," Keth-7 replied, studying the energy signatures and nuclear reactors. "Some kind of fusion drive system. It's also primitive." The lead ship was massive, easily the size of a Nexari battlecruiser, but it looked like it had been built in sections and welded together. Burn marks and hull patches suggested it had seen combat before. Instead of the smooth, seamless construction of galactic vessels, the ship looked functional and tough, like it was designed to take damage and keep fighting. "Incoming transmission from the human fleet," reported the communications officer. "Put it through," Keth-7 ordered. The screen flickered to life, showing a human female in what appeared to be military clothing. She had short dark hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Behind her, Keth-7 could see other humans moving efficiently around what looked like a primitive but functional command center. "Ambassador Keth-7, I'm Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Corps ship Indomitable. We received your distress call and we're here to help." Keth-7 stepped forward. "Captain Chen, we are grateful beyond words for your response. However, I must warn you, the enemy you're facing has defeated the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. They adapt to any technology, any weapon, any strategy. Perhaps you should review our tactical data before engaging." Captain Chen smiled, and there was something in that expression that reminded Keth-7 uncomfortably of the reports about humans enjoying dangerous situations. "Already did that on the way here. Interesting opponent. My tactical officer has some questions, though." Another human appeared on screen, a tall man with calculating eyes. "Commander Jake Morrison, Tactical Analysis. Your data shows the swarm adapts to energy-based weapons, quantum manipulation, and advanced defensive systems. What about kinetic weapons? Old-fashioned projectiles, explosives, that kind of thing?" Commander Vex answered. We haven't used such primitive methods in thousands of years. Energy weapons are far more efficient and precise." "Efficient and precise," Morrison repeated thoughtfully. "But the swarm learned to counter them. What about inefficient and imprecise? What about weapons that are basically just rocks thrown really, really hard?" Keth-7 felt a chill in his crystalline structure. "You mean to use crude kinetic weapons against an enemy that has defeated quantum-level technology?" "Sometimes crude works when fancy doesn't," Captain Chen said. "We've been monitoring your communications and tracking the swarm's movement patterns. They're hitting your outer defense line at Grid 7 right now, correct?" "Yes, but that position is heavily fortified with our most advanced shield generators and plasma artillery." "If you're thinking of engaging them there—" "We're not thinking about it," Chen interrupted. "We're doing it. Indomitable and her battle group are moving to intercept. We'll conduct reconnaissance in force and see how these things react to our approach." The transmission ended before Keth-7 could protest. Within hours, the first engagement reports began coming in, and they made no sense at all. "The human ships are firing solid projectiles," reported the sensor operator, disbelief clear in his voice. Metallic slugs accelerated to significant fractions of light speed. No energy signatures, no exotic matter, just metal moving very fast. "And the swarm's response?" Keth-7 asked. "They're confused, sir. Their adaptive algorithms seem to be struggling. Several swarm units have been destroyed outright by direct kinetic impact. The survivors are trying to adapt, but they keep adjusting for energy-based attacks that aren't coming." More reports followed. The humans were using nuclear weapons, but not in any way the galactic species recognized. Instead of clean antimatter or controlled fusion, they were using what could only be described as controlled explosions. Dirty, inefficient, and absolutely devastating against an enemy that expected sophisticated energy manipulation. "Captain Chen is requesting permission to board damaged swarm vessels for analysis," Commander Vex reported. "Board them?" Keth-7 was horrified. "That's suicide. The swarm bioships are filled with toxic atmosphere and adaptive defenses. No living being could survive inside one." "The humans seem to think they can," Vex replied. They're saying something about environmental suits and acceptable risk levels. The next report was even more disturbing. Human soldiers had actually entered a damaged swarm vessel and were fighting the creatures inside using what their reports called projectile weapons and high explosives. The biological horrors that could adapt to energy weapons and quantum attacks were apparently unprepared for humans with guns and grenades. "This is Sergeant Rodriguez. Echo Squad," came a transmission from inside the swarm ship. "We've secured the forward sections. These things are tough, but they don't seem to know what to do when you just shoot them with bullets. Moving to plant charges in what looks like their main power coupling." "Sergeant, this is Command," Captain Chen's voice responded. "What's your environmental status?" "Atmosphere is toxic, temperature is about 40 degrees too hot, and something in here is giving off radiation that would probably kill most species." "Standard Tuesday for us, ma'am. Charges planted and we're moving to extraction point." Keth 7 listened to this exchange with growing amazement. The humans were casually operating in conditions that would be lethal to most galactic species, and they were treating it as routine. The battle continued for 6 hours. When it ended, the swarm force that had been advancing steadily through the galaxy for months had been stopped cold. More than stopped. They had been driven back, their lead elements destroyed or fleeing in apparent confusion. Captain Chen's voice came over the communication system again. "Ambassador Keth 7, this is Indomitable. We've completed initial engagement with hostile forces. Tactical assessment. They're dangerous, but they're not used to opponents who fight dirty. We're going to need more data on their movement patterns and breeding cycles." "Breeding cycles?" Keth 7 asked weakly. "You can't kill an infestation by just fighting the soldiers," Chen explained matter-of-factly. "You have to find the nest and destroy it. My biowarfare specialists are analyzing the samples we collected. They think they can develop something that will target the swarm's reproductive systems." "Biowarfare? You mean biological weapons?" Commander Vex looked shocked. "Such things have been banned by galactic convention for centuries." There was a pause before Chen responded. "Ambassador, these things are trying to wipe out all intelligent life in the galaxy. I'm not really concerned about fighting fair. Are you?" Keth 7 realized that the humans approached warfare with the same mindset they approached survival, by using whatever worked, regardless of whether it was elegant or civilized. The galactic species had tried to fight the swarm according to the rules of civilized warfare, using approved weapons and accepted tactics. The humans had no such limitations. "Captain Chen," Keth 7 said slowly, "what do you need from us?" "Intelligence data, supply lines, and coordinate with any other forces you have left. We're going to take this fight to them, but we'll need local support." "Oh, an ambassador? Yes? You might want to warn the other survivors that our methods are going to seem pretty extreme. We're not like the other species you've worked with. We don't fight wars to make a point or follow rules. We fight wars to win them." As the human fleet began coordinating with the refugee forces, Keth 7 realized that everything was about to change. For the first time since the swarm appeared, they had an ally that might actually have a chance. The question was whether the galaxy would survive being saved by the humans. The war changed completely once the humans arrived, and Ambassador Keth 7 wasn't sure if he was witnessing salvation or madness. 3 weeks after first contact, human forces were operating across 17 star systems, and their methods continued to shock the galactic survivors. The carefully planned, technology-dependent warfare that had failed against the swarm was replaced by something the humans called adaptive chaos. "I still don't understand how they're winning," Commander Vex said, reviewing the latest battle reports. "Look at this engagement at Tau Ceti. The swarm had adapted to our plasma weapons, our quantum disruptors, even our antimatter charges. Then the humans arrived and started using, what do they call them? Crowbars?" Keth 7 studied the footage from the battle. Human soldiers in heavy armor were indeed using simple metal bars to attack swarm creatures that had proven immune to advanced energy weapons. When the creatures adapted to the crowbars, the humans switched to hammers. When they adapted to hammers, the humans used their bare hands. It's not about the weapons, he realized. It's about the unpredictability. The swarm can adapt to any specific threat, but they can't adapt to opponents who keep changing their entire approach. The most disturbing example was happening right now in the Kepler system. Marine Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez had volunteered to lead a boarding party into a swarm hive ship the size of a small moon. The mission briefing had been terrifyingly simple. Get inside, find the central coordination node, and destroy it. Rodriguez, this is command, came Captain Chen's voice over the communication system. What's your status? We're inside the hive, Captain, Rodriguez responded. The audio was filled with sounds of combat. Explosions, weapon fire, and something that sounded like power tools. These things keep adapting to our rifles, so we've switched to shotguns. When they adapted to shotguns, we went to flamethrowers. Now we're using plasma cutters from the engineering kit. Plasma cutters? Commander Vex looked confused. Those are construction tools, not weapons. Everything's a weapon if you use it right, Rodriguez replied cheerfully. My demolitions expert just figured out how to make improvised explosives from their own biomass. These things might be smart, but they sure didn't expect us to turn their own guts into grenades. Keth 7 watched the tactical display as the human boarding party moved deeper into the hive ship. Where other species would have used precision strikes and careful planning, the humans seemed to be making up their strategy as they went along. When they encountered a passage too narrow for their equipment, they blew a hole in the wall. When they found a sealed door, they cut through it with industrial tools. Most shocking of all, they seemed to be enjoying themselves. Contact front, Rodriguez called out. Big ones this time. Looks like they've adapted to projectile weapons and thermal attacks. Switching to, kinetic persuasion. What's kinetic persuasion? Asked a voice that Keth 7 recognized as Lieutenant Zhang, the human explosives expert. Hitting them with really big hammers, Rodriguez explained. Thompson, break out the sledgehammers. Williams, you've got the crowbar. Jackson, see if you can find something heavy to throw at them. The audio dissolved into chaos as the humans engaged massive swarm creatures using construction equipment as weapons. Somehow, impossibly, it was working. The creatures that had shrugged off quantum weapons were being destroyed by humans with sledgehammers. How is this possible? Commander Vex whispered. The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, the human xenobiologist who had been studying captured swarm specimens, appeared on the communication screen. She looked exhausted but excited. I think I understand what's happening, she said. The swarm's adaptation mechanism is incredibly sophisticated, but it's designed to counter technological threats. Energy patterns, molecular structures, quantum fluctuations, they can analyze and neutralize all of that within minutes. But, Keth 7 prompted, but they can't adapt to pure physical force applied in random ways by opponents who don't follow any logical combat doctrine. When Sergeant Rodriguez hits a swarm creature with a sledgehammer, there's no technology to analyze. It's just kinetic energy applied through crude leverage. The creature's adaptation systems keep waiting for a pattern to emerge, but Rodriguez never uses the same technique twice. Dr. Harper pulled up a data chart. Look at this engagement record. In the span of 1 hour, human forces used conventional weapons, improvised explosives, construction tools, hand-to-hand combat, and at one point something they called aggressive mechanical persuasion with a wrench. The swarm's neural network is literally overloading, trying to adapt to opponents who seem to invent new fighting methods every few minutes. The tactical situation was improving across all fronts, but not in ways that made sense to the galactic survivors. Human units were winning battles by refusing to fight them the same way twice. When energy weapons stopped working, they used projectiles. When projectiles stopped working, they used blades. When blades stopped working, they used blunt objects. When blunt objects stopped working, they used their hands and feet. Rodriguez here, came the sergeant's voice again. We've reached the central chamber. This thing is huge, looks like some kind of biological computer the size of a building. Permission to apply percussive maintenance? What's percussive maintenance? Captain Chen asked. Hitting it until it stops working, ma'am. Granted. Make sure you clear the area first. What followed was the sound of massive explosions mixed with what could only be described as construction work. The humans weren't just destroying the hive ship's central node. They were dismantling it piece by piece using tools meant for building things, not destroying them. Target eliminated, Rodriguez reported 20 minutes later. Used a combination of shaped charges, plasma cutters, and a really big hammer. The hive is going dark. Requesting extraction. As the human boarding party returned to their ships, Keth 7 reviewed the overall strategic situation. In 3 weeks, human forces had accomplished what the combined might of galactic civilization had failed to do in months. They had stopped the swarm's advance and begun pushing them back, but the cost was becoming clear. The humans were operating in conditions that would kill other species, using methods that violated every principle of civilized warfare, and taking casualties that would be considered unacceptable by galactic standards. "Captain Chen," Keth 7 called. "I've been reviewing your casualty reports. Your people are taking significant losses." Chen's response was matter of fact. "That's war, Ambassador. People get hurt. People die. But we're still here, and the swarm is retreating. I'll take those odds. But surely there must be a way to minimize the risks." "Ambassador," Chen interrupted gently, "we come from a world where everything is trying to kill us. Our weather, our animals, our diseases, even our plants. We learned a long time ago that sometimes you have to accept risk to survive. The other species in your galaxy, they've been safe for so long they've forgotten how to fight for their lives." Dr. Harper added, "The psychological profiles are interesting. Human soldiers show stress responses that peak during combat, then return to baseline quickly afterward. Most galactic species show prolonged trauma from combat situations that we consider routine." "Are you saying," Commander Vex asked slowly, "that humans are naturally adapted for warfare?" "Not warfare exactly," Dr. Harper replied. "Survival under extreme conditions. It just happens that those same adaptations make us very effective in combat situations." As if to prove her point, Rodriguez's voice came over the communication system again. "Command, this is Rodriguez. The hive ship is completely dead, but we've got good news. We captured one of their coordination modules intact. Dr. Harper, you're going to love this thing. It's like a biological computer that thinks it's smarter than everyone else. Should be fun to take apart." Keth 7 realized that the humans weren't just winning the war. They were enjoying it. Not the violence itself, but the challenge. The problem-solving, the chance to test themselves against impossible odds. For the first time since the swarm appeared, the galaxy had hope. But that hope came with a price, accepting that sometimes salvation arrived in forms that civilized beings weren't prepared to understand. The humans were winning, but they were also changing everything about how galactic civilization thought about conflict, survival, and what it meant to fight for their lives. 2 months into the war, something unprecedented happened that surprised even the humans. The other species began to learn. Ambassador Keth 7 watched from the command center as mixed species units conducted joint operations against swarm positions. What he saw would have been impossible to imagine before the humans arrived. Nexari crystal warriors fighting alongside human marines, luminal energy beings coordinating with human pilots, and Vorthan engineers working with human demolitions experts. "Keth Prime, this is Strike Team 7, came a transmission from the battle zone around Arcturus Station. The voice belonged to Zalthek, a Nexari warrior whose crystalline structure had been modified with human-designed armor plating. "Go ahead, Strike Team 7, Keth 7 responded. "We have successfully penetrated the swarm defensive perimeter using the human tactic called breaching and clearing. The human Staff Sergeant Vasquez has taught us something called covering fire and tactical advancement under pressure. We are preparing to assault the main hive structure." Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez's voice joined the communication. "Ambassador, these crystal folks are quick learners. Southek just figured out how to use his natural energy discharge as a suppressing weapon, while his squad moves to flanking positions. It's not pretty, but it's effective." Keth 7 had been following Vasquez's career with fascination and horror. The human sergeant had been assigned to train mixed species units in what the humans called ground combat tactics. Her methods were unorthodox by galactic standards, but they worked. The key, Vasquez had explained during one of her training sessions, is to stop thinking about fighting like it's a science. Start thinking about it like it's art. Ugly, practical art where the only thing that matters is going home alive. The transformation of the galactic survivors had been remarkable. Species that had relied on technological superiority for thousands of years were learning to fight with improvised weapons and crude tactics. More importantly, they were learning to think like humans. "Vasquez here," came the sergeant's voice from another part of the battlefield. "I've got a luminal unit that wants to try something crazy. They think they can overload their energy matrices to create what they're calling chaos resonance. It should disrupt swarm adaptation algorithms by producing random energy patterns. Is it safe?" asked the luminal commander, a being of pure energy named Bright Star Dancing. "Probably not," Vasquez admitted cheerfully, "but neither is letting the swarm eat the galaxy. Your choice, Bright Star? Then we will attempt this chaos resonance, the luminol replied. As you humans say, nothing ventured, nothing gained. The battle that followed demonstrated how much the galactic species had changed. The luminols created wild, unpredictable energy patterns that confused the swarm's adaptation systems. The Nexari used their crystal formations to create improvised fortifications and weapons. The Vorthons applied their engineering skills to building traps and defensive positions using salvaged materials. But the most significant change was psychological. The species that had once retreated, in the face of superior force, were now advancing into danger because they had learned what humans had always known. Sometimes the only way out is through. Target eliminated, reported Zaltek an hour later. The swarm hive has been destroyed using a combination of luminal energy discharge, Nexari crystal resonance, and human explosives. Sergeant Vasquez calls this a mixed bag approach. Good work, Strike Team 7, Keth 7 replied. Return to base for debrief and medical evaluation. What he heard next would have been unthinkable before the humans arrived. Medical evaluation unnecessary, Zaltek responded. Minor damage to crystal matrix but still combat effective. Requesting assignment to next target. It was a purely human response, shrugging off injuries that would have sidelined other species and asking for more combat. The crystalline warrior had learned more than human tactics. He had learned the human mindset. Dr. Harper joined Keth 7 in the command center, carrying a datapad filled with her latest research. The psychological changes are fascinating, she said. We're not just teaching them to fight differently. We're teaching them to think differently about risk, about survival, about what's acceptable loss. Is that a good thing? Keth 7 asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. It's a necessary thing, Dr. Harper replied. The swarm represents an existential threat that can't be defeated with civilized methods. Your species evolved in safe environments where cooperation and technological advancement were the keys to survival. Humans evolved where the key to survival was adaptability and willingness to take risks. She pulled up a holographic display showing brain scans of various species. Look at these neural patterns. Before training with humans, the galactic species showed stress responses that peaked when faced with danger and remained elevated for extended periods. After training, their responses are starting to match human patterns. High stress during immediate danger, followed by rapid recovery. They're becoming more like humans, Keth 7 observed. In the ways that matter for survival, yes, but they're also teaching us things. The Nexari showed us how to use crystalline resonance to amplify our weapon systems. The luminals taught us energy manipulation techniques that we're incorporating into our shield generators. The Vorthons, well, they've redesigned half our equipment to be more efficient. A new transmission interrupted their conversation. This time it was Lieutenant Commander Yuki Tanaka, calling from deep space where she was leading a reconnaissance mission behind swarm lines. Command, this is Recon 7. We've located what appears to be a major swarm breeding facility. It's heavily defended, but we think we can take it out. Captain Chen's voice responded immediately. Negative, Recon 7. That facility is too heavily defended for your current force strength. Return to base and we'll plan a larger assault. Ma'am, with respect, I think we can do this. I've got a mixed species team here, and we've come up with a plan that's crazy enough to work. The swarm won't expect an attack from a force this small, and we've learned some tricks they haven't adapted to yet. There was a long pause before Chen responded. Tanaka, define crazy enough to work. Well, the luminals think they can create a massive energy discharge that will blind the facility's sensors for about 10 minutes. The Nexari can use their crystal formations to create a tunnel through the asteroid field. The Vorthons have figured out how to turn our remaining nuclear warheads into shaped charges, and I can fly the ship manually through their defenses. Manually? Without computer assistance? Yes, ma'am. Humans are still better than computers at making last-second decisions. The swarm's defense systems are designed to track predictable flight patterns. I can fly unpredictably. Keth 7 listened to this exchange with amazement. A few months ago, the idea of a small mixed-species team attempting to assault a major swarm facility would have been suicide. Now it sounded like a reasonable tactical option. You understand this is essentially a suicide mission? Chen asked. Ma'am, everything we do is essentially a suicide mission. That's what war means. But if we can take out that breeding facility, we'll save millions of lives. Seems like a fair trade. Dr. Harper leaned over to Keth 7. That's pure human thinking right there. Risk assessment based on potential benefits rather than potential costs. Captain Chen's response came after another long pause. Approved. But I want constant communication. And if things go bad, you abort immediately. We can't afford to lose experienced mixed species teams. Roger that, Command. Recon 7 beginning approach. Over the next 6 hours, Keth 7 watched as Tanaka's small team accomplished something that should have been impossible. They infiltrated the heavily defended facility, planted their improvised explosives, and escaped while the entire complex collapsed behind them. The victory was significant. But what impressed Keth 7 most was how the different species had worked together. The Luminals had provided energy support. The Nexari had created defensive positions. The Vorthans had handled technical challenges. And the humans had provided leadership and tactical flexibility. Most importantly, all of them had been willing to risk their lives for the greater good. Strike Team 7 requesting new assignment, came Zaltek's voice again. We have identified another swarm position that appears vulnerable to combined species assault. Keth 7 realized that the war had changed all of them. The galactic species were no longer refugees waiting to be saved. They had become soldiers, willing to fight for their survival using methods they would have considered barbaric just months earlier. And somehow, in learning to fight like humans, they had also learned what it meant to truly live. The final battle began at dawn on what humans called Tuesday, though the concept of weekdays seemed meaningless when facing the end of galactic civilization. Admiral Sarah, Chen stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, looking at the tactical display that showed the swarm's primary hive nexus. The structure was enormous, a biomechanical construct the size of Earth's moon, pulsing with dark energy and surrounded by thousands of defensive organisms. Intelligence suggested it was the central coordination point for the entire swarm invasion. Final fleet count, Commander Morrison? She asked. 14 human battle groups, 8 Nexari crystal formations, 5 luminal energy squadrons, and 12 mixed species assault units, Morrison replied. Total force strength approximately 400 ships and 50,000 personnel. Chen nodded grimly. The fleet represented everything that remained of galactic civilization's military capacity. If they failed here, there would be no second chance. Admiral, came Ambassador Keth 7's voice from the command center. The Council of Survivors wishes to express their gratitude for everything humanity has done. If this assault fails, it won't fail, Chen interrupted. Not because we're better than the swarm, but because we're too stubborn to quit. That's what you get when you ask Deathworlders for help. The assault plan was typically human in its simplicity. Ram the primary fleet into the hive nexus while smaller units created diversions. Board the structure, fight their way to the central core, and destroy it from the inside. No elegant technology, no sophisticated strategies, just controlled violence applied with maximum efficiency. All units. This is Admiral Chen. Execute Operation Last Stand. The combined fleet moved forward, and for the first time in the war, the swarm seemed ready for them. The defensive organisms had adapted to human tactics over months of combat. Energy shields deflected kinetic weapons. Adaptive armor absorbed explosive damage. Biomechanical fighters countered human unpredictability with their own chaotic patterns. They've learned, Morrison observed as the first wave of attacks met heavy resistance. Good, Chen replied. Makes this more interesting. All units implement Protocol Chaos. What followed was the most insane battle in galactic history. Human ships fired everything they had: kinetic weapons, nuclear missiles, experimental plasma cannons, and in one memorable case, a cargo container full of scrap metal accelerated to relativistic speeds. When conventional weapons failed, they used improvised ones. When improvised weapons failed, they used their ships as weapons. The luminals created massive energy discharges that overloaded swarm sensors. The Nexari formed crystalline formations that acted as both shields and weapons platforms. The mixed species units used tactics that changed faster than the swarm could adapt. But it wasn't enough. The hive nexus was too well defended. Its adaptive systems too sophisticated. For every swarm unit they destroyed, 2 more appeared. For every tactic that worked, the swarm developed 3 counters. Admiral, we're taking heavy losses, Morrison reported. Casualty rates approaching 60%. Chen watched as ships disappeared from the tactical display, each one representing hundreds of lives lost. The math was simple. They were losing this battle and they were running out of time. Signal the fleet, she ordered. Implement Operation Desperation. Ma'am, that's not a real operation. It is now. All units abandon conventional tactics. Use whatever works. If you run out of ammunition, ram them. If your ship is disabled, evacuate to other vessels and keep fighting. We're not leaving until that thing is dead. The battle transformed into something that defied military logic. Ships with no weapons left used their engines as clubs. Crews from destroyed vessels transferred to other ships and kept fighting. Human Marines used boarding pods to assault swarm organisms, fighting them from the inside with whatever weapons they could find. Sergeant Rodriguez, whose boarding parties had become legendary throughout the fleet, led an assault on one of the Nexus's primary defensive nodes. This is Echo Squad, we're inside the target. These things have adapted to our weapons, our explosives, and our tactics. Switching to Plan Z. What's Plan Z? Asked his commanding officer. Hit them with wrenches until they stop moving, Rodriguez replied matter-of-factly. Williams, break out the toolbox. We're going old school. While the fleet fought desperately outside, Admiral Chen made a decision that would have horrified the galactic survivors if they had understood what she was planning. Morrison, plot a collision course with the Hive Nexus. Full ramming speed. Admiral, the Indomitable can't survive that kind of impact. I know. Signal the fleet to continue the assault without us. We're going to punch a hole in their defenses big enough for the boarding parties to get through. As the massive battleship accelerated toward the Hive Nexus, Chen opened a communication channel to the entire fleet. All units, this is Admiral Chen. The Indomitable is making a final approach to create a breach in the enemy's primary structure. Continue the mission. Make it count. The ship's impact was visible across the star system. The Indomitable, moving at significant relativistic speed, punched through the Hive's outer defenses like a bullet through paper. The explosion that followed opened a massive crater in the biomechanical structure. Breach confirmed, came Rodriguez's voice from inside the Hive. Admiral Chen's ship opened up the whole front face. We've got a clear path to the central core. What followed was the largest boarding action in history as thousands of soldiers from dozens of species fought their way through the Hive's internal passages. They used every weapon they had, every tactic they had learned, and when those failed, they used their bare hands. The core chamber was a cathedral-sized space filled with biomechanical processing nodes that pulsed with alien intelligence. At its center was something that defied description, part machine, part organism, part something else entirely. It was the swarm's central mind, the thing that had coordinated the destruction of entire civilizations. Well, said Rodriguez, looking at the massive structure, that's definitely above my pay grade. But I've got explosives and it's got vital-looking parts. Seems like a solvable problem. As the assault teams placed their charges, the central mind spoke, not in words but in thoughts that somehow reached every soldier in the chamber. You do not understand what you are destroying. I was created to prune galactic civilization when it became stagnant, to ensure that intelligence did not grow weak through comfort and safety. I have served this purpose for millions of years. Staff Sergeant Vasquez, who had survived the crash of the Indomitable and fought her way to the core chamber, responded while arming her charges. Yeah, well, we're from a planet where everything tries to kill us on a daily basis. We don't get weak through comfort because we don't get comfort. Consider this a resignation letter. Your species is an anomaly, the mind continued. You evolved strength through adversity, adaptation through conflict. You are what the other species should have become. Maybe, Rodriguez said, setting the final charges, but they didn't have to become anything. They just had to survive long enough for us to show up. The explosions that followed weren't elegant or sophisticated. They were human explosives, crude and effective, designed to destroy rather than disable. As the core chamber collapsed and the hive mind died, its final transmission was something like surprise. It had never encountered a species that viewed existential threats as Tuesday morning problems. 6 months later, Ambassador Keth 7 stood in the new headquarters of the Galactic Alliance on Earth. The name change from Confederation to Alliance reflected more than just politics. It represented a fundamental shift in how the galaxy approached the concept of survival. The integration process is proceeding better than expected, he reported to the Alliance Council. The Nexari have established 3 new colonies using human defensive protocols. The Luminals are teaching energy manipulation to human engineers. The Vorthons are collaborating on ship designs that combine human durability with galactic efficiency. But the most significant change was harder to quantify. The species that had once relied entirely on technology and cooperation had learned something else: the willingness to fight for their existence. They had learned to be dangerous when necessary, to take risks when required, and to never give up when survival was at stake. Captain Chen, now Admiral Chen, had survived the crash of the Indomitable and now commanded the Alliance military. Her philosophy had become the unofficial motto of the new galactic order. Sometimes the only way to save civilization is to be willing to lose it. Dr. Harper had established the Institute for Survival Studies, where researchers from dozens of species studied what she called adaptive resilience, the ability to thrive under adverse conditions rather than simply endure them. And throughout the galaxy, on worlds that had been devastated by the swarm, mixed species colonies were rebuilding using principles that combined the best of galactic technology with human stubbornness. "There is one final matter," Keth 7 said, addressing the council. "The humans have requested that we establish what they call worst-case scenario protocols. They want us to be prepared for future existential threats." "What kind of protocols?" asked an Ixari representative.